Hello, my name is Rachel Norris. This is part 3 of the Celtic Nouveau jewellery collection in Wirework. There's going to be a slide next showing you what's included. I hope you've already seen parts 1 and 2, and if not, you do need to see them first. So there'll be links in the description on this video and also at the end of the video, so you can get back to those as well. So they all together form a 4.5 hour tutorial. So this one is 1.5 hours long, and this is part 3, so there's plenty to in each section, and I hope you enjoy working through this section of part 3. So let's get started. We're now going to make the clasp for the necklace, and you're going to use, if I zoom in a little bit, you're going to use 1mm wire and some 6mm beads. It's quite simple really, you don't need very many materials to make these little clasps. So, and they're quite secure, easy to fasten, and they sort of match the wire and the gemstones in the necklace. So we're going to move on to making those. Just make sure that the clasps are virtually the same length, and but you can vary their size, because that can help you vary the size of your necklace. If you want a shorter length necklace, you can make this clasp a lot smaller, for example. So there's things you can do. So I'm going to move away, and we're going to start to make the shepherd's hook side of the necklace first. So taking a sort of I suppose a 20cm length of 1mm wire. I don't think you need much more than that. Just start to make a little curl at one end using round nose pliers. So just, I'm going to put these beads to one side because they're rolling around all over the place. Put them on the sticky bead mat and move this other wire out of the way, so you've got a bit of a clearer area. So start using round nose pliers, just start to make a little curl at one end. Sorry, I've got pen all over my hands. I'm just left-handed and I'm always writing on my hands, basically, more than paper sometimes. So making a little curl, you've got that the start of the shepherd's hook finding clasp. Just use flush cutter pliers just to cut, then trim the end off, just as we always do, and then just start to form. You can see what I'm doing. I'm gripping this curl when I'm actually also pulling this around with into more of a curl with the other hand. So you can see, curl round like so. I've probably overdone it for the camera, but there we go. That's a little curl, and now we're going to make this loop shape, and you can just do this with your fingers, to be honest, or you can use a mandrel. For example, if you used a mandrel, you could make sure your loop was the same size, so you just pull it around a mandrel, for example. That can be a sort of large marker pen or whatever you've got. Okay, so you can use that mandrel to make a really nice regular shepherd's hook size, so you can do that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just flatten this out a little bit because it's just distorted a little bit. There we go, gentle flatten out. And then I'm going to make a very, very small little bend in the wire so it projects straight downwards or away from the hook, just beyond the curl that we made. Okay, so it's a little tiny bend. It's not much of one, but just demarcates where you want your bead to sit. So I'm going to get a 6mm bead and thread it on to the wire, so it sits near that bend, like so. Now, holding the bead with one hand and forefinger and thumb where you want it to be, I'm going to make a bend fairly close, but not absolutely close, just a millimetre or two away from the end of the bead, outwards, using the tip of your chain nose pliers, like so. Insert round nose pliers very, very close to the bend, and grip the wire now between the pliers, and then pull the wire around, and I'm depending on how big you want your loop to be, and I want it fairly big, so it's near the base of the round nose pliers. But where you place the wire along the base of the pliers will determine how big your loop will be. So I've pulled it round, so there's not quite enough room for me to pull this wire around the space of this loop. So I'm taking the pliers out and then popping it on the loop on the other jaw of the pliers. So I've got a bit more room here to move this wire. So it's coming out to one side. Pushing that bead up close to the wire. I'm just going to grip this loop with chain nose pliers now, and I'm going to pull the wire around once around the loop, the base of the loop. I'll get there in the end. And then what I need to do then is pull the wire around. You see I'm pulling the wire around the bead, but I'm still gripping that loop, so it helps hold it all in place. You can see? Okay. And before I do too much more, actually, what I should do, you see I've started to frame that bead. I'm just going to hammer that loop. So I'm going to bring that steel block in, and I'm just going to hammer the back of this loop. So I'm going to, of this hook, sorry. So taking it in, I'm going to use a large face hammer, so I'm going to get quite a lot of the hook all done at once. So I'm just going to bash away. Slightly stroking it so I don't do too many marks. I'm also hammering a little bit more with a curl. Okay, that's done. And I'm going to turn the piece around and just hammer that little loop at the end. I can use a small face hammer for that one. Okay, ooh, just take that mark out, a little stroke. There's a mark there which I can take out. A little stroking movements of the hammer. That's it. So I'm going to go back now to framing this bead. So this now we just need to pull the wire around this hook, which is now hardened a bit more. It's a bit easier to work, and it's already got its flat face. So we need to hold the bead and this wire in place, and I'm just going to pull it round the hook end. Can you see? So I've got a nice, just one turn round, and I'm going to pull it round with my fingers. And you can use your pliers if you want to, but I'm just using my fingers because this wire is really quite malleable. I'm just going to pull this wire backwards a little bit so that it's really framing the bead either side and not coming too much round to the front. You see I pulled it round a little bit so that it's on the side of the bead. And now I'm going to pull this wire around so it starts to loop around just below, closer to the bead than that first wrap loop you made when you first made that little loop at the end. Round once. And here, you can see, I just need to then just trim this wire close in to this, I suppose this little frame around the bead. So I'm going to snip really, really close. Flat nose pliers up, close to the end of the wire like that. Just the tips, because I don't want to cut things I don't want to cut. Just take a little bit of time. That's it. Now I'm going to just squeeze this wire so it's as close. You can see I'm squeezing either side, so it's as close in to that loop. So this wire here, so that the wire end sort of gets protected by it and hidden out of sight. So just do a few squeezes either side just to make sure that happens. And then we've got a nice hook end with a sort of, I suppose, a framed bead either side. That looks quite pretty like that. There we go. So that's that hook end. So we're going to have to move on now and do the loop end of the clasp. Moving on to the loop end of the clasp, we just have a slightly more complex clasp to make, only because there's 2 wire ends to deal with rather than 1 wire tail to work with. So first of all, I'm going to make the large loop first of all. So just bending about 1/3 of the way along a length of about 20 to 30 centimetres of wire. To be honest, I'm using 20 to 30 centimetres, and I make the spare into jump rings, so that's why I'm working with slightly longer than I need. So you've got a little loop, and make it about the same length as the hook. So you've got your hook like made earlier, so just take that in so that it's about the same length as that hook, so then it has a balance to it and it's the same. So gripping near the shorter end, I'm just going to where it crosses over each other, so you make it like a teardrop shape. Where it crosses over each other, flare this one out sharply to the side, and flare this one, the longer tail, downwards. So I'm gripping quite close where I want to bend, I'm just pulling it downwards, so it's pulling it out into the length of the clasp now. Now I'm just going to get rid of this wire now. I just want to work with the 1 single wire tail. So I'm going to pull it round and just get rid of that one. Once with the loop, once around the base of the loop, okay? And you can make a little curl of that, but I'm just going to cut it here now. So you can curl it, make a curl and detail, but we're just going to do this fairly simply. Just need to hammer this this clasp now. So I'm bring in the steel block. Sorry, I got a lot in there. Not to see. There we go. There's the steel block, and I'm just going to hammer this. And this, you can do all sorts of things. You can keep it as a teardrop loop, or you can squish the ends. Say that, squish the ends here to make it a bit more like a leaf shape. So you could do that. So we'll do that now. And I'm just going to hammer around. This end of the clasp. You can see the small face hammer leaves a few more marks. And the larger hammer probably leaves a few marks. So there we go. So there's the teardrop leaf end of the clasp. So I'm going to take that block away. And we're going to thread on a 6mm bead. And now we're going to do a very similar thing to the shepherd's hook. So we're going to make the loop and then we're going to wrap around the bead. So the bead doesn't have to be tight on this this setting. We need a little bit of play in it, so we can actually attach the wires that run around the bead either side. So just maybe 2 or 3mm below the bead, make a turn to the side. So you've got a little bit of play, okay? I'm using tray nose pliers, make a little bend. Then round nose pliers in, same level as you did for the base loop of the shepherd's hook. Round we go. There we go. Round we go. There we are. Little sorry, I just had to check the time. Little loop there. Clamp quite close to the base of the loop there, and then pull it round once. Okay, I'm just going to hammer that loop just quickly before I do anything more, so to the back of it. A small face hammer in here. Okay, take that away. Now what we're going to do, we're going to make that frame, aren't we? So I'm going to bring that around with your hands, round, and you can actually bring it just close to the bead, just below that knot, that attachment you did for the first, sorry, the wrap loop you did at the base of this large loop, for the clasp. Make sure this sits fairly flat. I'm holding the bead and I'm going to pull this round. Yeah, there we go. Just once, and then I'm going to bring this round. And we're going to frame the other side. Just make sure it sits the side of the bead. Again, you can use your pliers to pull that round a little bit if you want to. and you can use your pliers to pull that bit round if you want to, just to make sure it really sits to the side of the bead. And then remember what we did, bringing this wire in just below that first knot round, and actually this one's travelled round the knot in a little spiral and has come in on the inside of the loop, and that doesn't matter if that happens, because you can either trim it there at the base here, or you can trim it here, and that's if it comes around over the loop, it doesn't matter either. So I'm trimming it really close to the loop, but so it hangs by about a millimetre or so, and then what I'm going to do is squish this or pull this in so that it sits inside the loop now. So that's the other way of doing it. Use the points of the pliers, I'm gripping the loop, the end loop, really gripping this in, smoothing it down so that it doesn't catch and it looks nice. So let's just have a look at that. I need to smooth down a bit more. There we go, another squish either side. You see that squish? And you can see that now wraps round. Just make sure as you just travel around with a smoothing action that then when you run out your hands over the piece, there's nothing that's going to catch you when you're wearing it. So you've made now a loop and a shepherded hook clasp for your necklace now, so you can add that into your designs, and you can use this with all sorts of designs. So that's the nice thing about this clasp, it's really, really versatile. There we go, that's it. So and we'll go to the next step now. In this section, I'm just going to show you how to make some jump rings for, in matching wire. I'm using the scrap wire basically from all the frames to make up the jump rings you need for the design. And mostly they're going to be 5mm external diameter. That means a 3mm mandrel with 1mm wire either side adds up to being 5, or 7mm. That means a 5mm mandrel. I haven't got my 5mm gizmo mandrel here, but you can see the sort of things you can use, and it's this section I think here and this section here on the step mandrels. So I'll just show you quickly how to shape the wire to form the jump rings. I've got a bit of a wire left over from I cut off making a frame, and I'm going to start just by holding the wire against maybe the larger diameter, and you can see I've held the tail here. I'm just going to wrap with my hand around this mandrel, and I've made some 7mm external diameter jump rings there. So I'm just going to cut that end off, and you can leave it on the mandrel, and that's the best thing to do really, or take it off, but don't cut the jump rings immediately because they'll spring apart a bit more, so you need them to develop their memory of being in their circle. So let them be for a few hours before you cut them. And the same thing you can do for the gizmo mandrel. I'm just going to make some 5mm jump rings here. So wrap the tail end of your wire around the mandrel. Bring the main wire that you want to work with over the front of the mandrel. And you can either clamp it to a surface or just insert it into the bracket that you've got. And then just, oops, to get that tail out of the way. And then start to turn. I've threaded the rod through this the bracket, and just to start to turn the handle, and you can see the jump rings starting to form. It's much easier if you do clamp it to the surface, but you can just hold it with your hand as well. There we go. That's you can turn it pretty quickly, and the wire. You can make more jump rings with a long mandrel like this, I just found working with little bits of wire, it was just as easy to use this because you don't waste as much wire going around the handles. So both have their uses, to be honest. So I'm going to take this off the mandrel, and I'm going to actually, in fact, I'm not going to cut the wire off from this ring set of rings because it's going to spring apart. So I'm going to use some ones I made earlier. So here we go. Here's some jump rings I made earlier. So I'm just going to bring, just might need to focus this up a little bit. There we go. So here we've got some larger ones. You can see the cut end. Just going to hold it in so it focuses. Not sure whether it's going to focus. Let's see. I wonder whether it is. There you go. So I'm just going to bring in some flash cutter pliers. Sorry about my finger. It's been burnt on a stove. And I'm going to bring in some flash cutter pliers with a flat edge as close as you can to the cut end or the end on this spiral that you've formed, and cut fairly near the tips a nice little flat end. Then what you need to do is turn the pliers over, because you want to cut the other half of the jump ring. And I'm inserting them in as far near as I can to that first cut end and making another snip. There we go. And I've got a jump ring formed with 2 flat edges because I've used this flat edge of the pliers to cut my jump rings. I'm just going to cut another one so you can see it again. Again, try and make it so perpendicular to the wire end, so you get a nice straight end. I'm going to bring it in a little bit closer even. There and there. Right. I'm going to cut it the wrong way so you can see the difference. So I'm going to cut it with the wrong side of the pliers. So I'm going to cut it with this curved, well, sorry, the diagonal or triangular side first. And you see it has a squashed end. Now if I turn it again the wrong way, it'll have a squashed end. And it won't be a jump ring that closes properly. So I'll show you the difference in a minute. Let's try and show you the difference. If I put that one here, I'm going to then pick up the other one so you can see the other ones and hopefully get them to so you can see the difference between the wire ends. Is it going to focus? Can you see the one on the left has the triangular squashed ends and that won't close properly, and the other one has a nice flat edge. Again, I'm really sorry if it's waving around in front of you. I just hope that focuses in nicely so you can see the difference. So using the flat straight edge of the pliers will give you a nice flat end to the jump ring, and it will close much better. And to open and close a jump ring, I'm doing it the wrong one first of all, use a pair of chain nose pliers. Again, I just need to really focus in if I can. Just got to get it to focus. Use both ends of the chain nose plier, grip either side. I'm doing it so you can see it, and then you just swing and open and close it. Hold one plier firmly and use the other one just to open and close. You see, but you see this one won't form a really nice closed jump ring because it's got these squashed ends. If I bring up the other ones, which have the nice cut end, you'll see that this will close much more nicely. So again, we're going to do the same thing, opening and closing. And you can hear, if you can, I'm talking, a little click, and that click is the thing you want to hear when you're using jump rings, because it's the ends really sort of almost knitting together. They're not fused or anything, but they're knitting together nicely. And that is a nice closed jump ring. I do hope it's focused nicely for you. There we go, I'll bring it away. There we are. So that's the sort of jump ring effect you want. So that's making, opening and closing jump rings. Oh yes, and if you want to loop them through components, you just open it. I'm just going to pick up a jump ring and then you just close it again and you've got your components in place. So that's how you use a jump ring to join something together. Right, moving on to the next thing now. Just going to make the S-shaped clasp for the bracelet now, and it's about 18mm in length. You can make it smaller, 15mm in length or whatever, but you need obviously 2 of these, and I've used a template here so you can actually basically make them exactly the same size. So you can screenshot this and print it out for your own use, just with this ruler to help you and get it to the right size for you. So I'm just going to take the ruler away and this bracelet away so we can actually just work with it. And I've got about, I don't know, 8 centimetres of wire, of 1mm wire, and you basically use the end bits that you're not using, that come off your frames and things like that. Any scraps, save them for making these clasps and things like that. So we can make just one end first. So I'm just going to make a little curl at one end of the wire, and I remember I'm using the round nose pliers to do that. And then just use flush cutters to cut the straight end off. And bring in the tips. And you're working with the tips of the wire to make that first curl. So it's a very small curl, first of all. There we go. Now I'm going to make the smaller end. Bring in the round nose pliers to about halfway down. And just grip the wire and turn the piece to make the smaller end. You see, so I've got the smaller end. Just check it for size. Now I've made that a little bit small, so what we can do is just make that a little bit wider, bigger. So just opening it out again and just making the loop a bit wider. Yeah, that'll do. There we go. So the next thing to do is make the larger end of the clasp. So I'm just going to start to form the bend over the template now, just so they've got it in the right place. And you can use a mandrel or just put it over the wire like this, over the template like this. I'm just holding it in place as I pull it round. And then I'm just going to bring in the tips of the chain nose pliers again and make a little turn where I want that little loop. Start to turn it. Okay, I started to make a little bend. Now I'm going to lift the piece off the paper and then pop some round nose pliers in place. Yeah, where you made that bend. Just the tips, so we can make that loop the same size as the other side. There we go. That's it. And then we're going to just cut where that wire crosses, or just before it crosses that larger loop. There we go. And then squash it just gently flat with chain nose pliers and check it against the diagram. That's about right. There we go. And then finally just hammer. So I'm going to bring in a hammer and block, and you can use a nice big faced hammer to cover the whole piece actually if you like. So I'm going to do that now, or if you've got your little hammers you can use that too. So I'm just going to just hammer that in place now. I'm doing a slightly circular motion, not bashing too hard, and that's the clasp form. So you just need to make 2 of those for the bracelet. Okay. So now we're going to make a little, I suppose, looped bracelet connector here that's going to fit in between these Celtic knot designs in the bracelet. And you need 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. So I'm using about 10 centimeters of 1mm wire, and again small lengths. That's all you need. So there's a template for you if you need it, and you can screenshot it and print it out so you can use it as a basis. So again, making sure all these connectors are the same size. I'm going to take that ruler away, slightly move the bracelet away so we can work to that now. So let's make the first loop. So I'm just going to make a big round loop in the centre, and I'll bring in round nose pliers, or you can use a mandrel in fact actually. So I'm going to use a mandrel, or you can use round nose pliers to make that circle. So I'm using one a little bit smaller than the size that you need, so that you can cope with using round nose pliers if you have to. So I've made a circle around it, and that will do. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is just pull this around. In fact, this template just needs to be changed a little bit. It's actually this way, and that's the cut end. So pull that around like so. I'm going to use round nose pliers to bring in, so it just clamps those wires so they lie over each other like so, and then clamp into where that crosses, where you feel it's going to be one end, with the round nose pliers quite near the base, and then pull this wire tail around near the base of it, please, near the base. Pull the wire tail right around. I'm going to move this out so I can just finish off that pull around. You see what I'm doing? There we go. And you'll need to cut that quite close to where it crosses. Okay, so that's one end done. Just bring that in so it's really quite as close as you can. Now we need to finish off this loop a little bit because it's not quite round enough, so I want to bring that in a bit more, you see, and then we're going to make sure that we grip exactly opposite to that first crossing of the wire there. So I'm gripping exactly opposite, so it's in a line almost, as you can see, all the way down. So now I'm going to pull this around. I need to make sure it's near the base as well, near the base, around this plier tip. Remove where you feel that you need to just get a bit of space to bring this round. There we go. There. And so you can see you've made your loop. I think that one probably is a bit too small, so you can see this one's the technique's a little bit better for this one. So cut very close to where it crosses, and then squash things a little bit flat. We'll just put it into shape. Now what we do need to do is a tiny little bit of hammering on the end loop. So I'm going to bring in a hammering block, and we just need to hammer, and I'm going to use a small faced hammer. And again, a large faced hammer, you just use the edge. I'm working to the edge of the block, you can see that, and just hammering the edge loop, not the middle bit where it all crosses, just that edge. Okay, and the other side, and that just means that is a bit more work hard and is going to stay in place and be a secure fastening point, because that's where you're going to be attaching your jump rings. This bit is going to have a bead sitting inside it, and this is going to have jump rings sitting inside it. So that's basically it, and just adjusting a little bit so it's the same size, and just make I made 1, 2, 3, 4 of those for the bracelet. And if you turn it over, you can see how it's made in the same way as this one, and make sure they're about the same size. Okay, so now we're going to add some beads in, so I'll come back for that in a moment. Right, here we've got a 6mm round bead and a little bit of 0.4mm wire. I'm using probably about 30 centimeters, no more than that. And we're going to start to attach the bead into place. So just taking a bit of the end of the 0.4mm wire, near the end, but not quite at the end, probably about, gosh, about 6 or 7 centimeters from one end. Just start to wrap the 0.4mm wire around one of the side loops. Okay, like so, maybe 4 or 5 times. I'm not going to quite cut it yet because I need to keep some tension on this. I don't want to pull the wire out of its where it's attached if I'm pulling across with a bead. So the next thing to do is wrap once, maybe, no, 3 times, I think, 3 times around this little junction where the wires all cross over each other between the outer loop and the central loop. So I'm doing it 3 times, just so it matches on the other side. So putting it gently through, like so. And then I'm going to thread on. Just make sure these wires don't cross over each other. So because I'm working to camera, you normally would rotate the piece and have a little look at it. And here we go, pulling that over, and I'm just going to thread on a 6mm round. So bring it in really tight, or as tight as you can, so it sits inside the central loop. And again, you don't have to add a bead in. You can use this as a connector without a bead in quite happily. Actually, it makes a brilliant connector for all sorts of different things, necklaces and in between layers of gemstones and all sorts of things. So you can see while I've been talking, I've just wrapped some wire around the other side of the central loop where all the wires cross over each other. And I'm now going to hold the bead between 4 fingers and just pull the wire as hard as I can, just to make sure it really sits inside that loop and the wire's pulled down nicely, so it sits inside that loop nicely. There might be a little bit of a gap. If you want to pass the wire through the bead again and come round, that's absolutely fine. And then all I'm doing is coming through once on that side of the attachment, and another time on the other side of that attachment through the loop, from back to front, so you can see how I'm coming through from back to front. And then I'm going to pull that wire a bit tighter just so it all cinches into place, and then wrap around this side of the loop, not the cut end. To make sure you don't wrap to the cut end, wrap around the end where it comes out of the central loop. So if you wrap around the cut end, it will just slip out. So make sure you wrap around this side. And again, you can see how it's the opposite side on that one. Wrap round this 5 times in the same way as you did the other side. Oopsie daisy. There we go. Now, make sure those little wraps are really neatly and tightly packed. If you want to, just squish them together a little bit. There we go. Squish that together so it looks nice and neat. I'm just going to get my flush cutters in so that we can cut those ends off. So here we go. Let's do that now. Flush cutters as close as you can to the inside edge of that loop. Here we go, hit that side. Get rid of those little wire. There we go, it's all gone. And then you need to smooth that around. So a little smoothing action. Smooth around and smooth around. There we go. And from the back. And then run your fingers over it just to make sure there's nothing going to catch you. The last thing you want is a bracelet catching you, or a component catching you against the side of the skin. So we're going to talk, we've already made those Celtic knot shapes with the necklace. We've now made the clasps and the jump rings and the connector loops. To make the wrap loop component for the earrings and the necklace, you'll need to use a ball end head pin. I've got 11.0, you can have 2 for the necklace I think I put on, but I put 1 for the earrings. 11.0 seed bead there, a 4mm round, 6mm round, and 11.0 seed bead. And you push those up close to the, so they're fairly tight across to the ball end of the head pin. Taking chain nose pliers first, holding the bead with in place with the other hand, just make a bend, a sort of almost a right angle bend to one side. Then bring in some round nose pliers, and you just need to make sure that you're placing the round nose pliers tips at the same level each time, so that you make sure that your loops are the same size. So I've got about half to a third of the way down. I'm gripping the wire near that bend, and I'm going to pull the wire around the round nose pliers tips. Just going to make sure that just slightly moving the tips a little bit, so I've got a little bit of room. In fact, I'm going to bring the component off the tips and then put it onto the other tip, so I've got more room to pull this wire around. And you can see I'm manipulating it so that the wire tail projects to one side, and you can roll up, roll outwards, and left or right to make that loop larger and smaller if you want to. Okay, and you can roll down to bring that loop as close to that bead as you can. Obviously there's a certain limit to the tension because you can break this little ball end off and you can fracture these beads. So just tight, but not like excruciatingly tight, okay? So now using chain nose pliers again, and you're working near the tips, just grip that little loop in place. Then pull the tail around with your other hand, probably only once because I've got not very much space. I don't want to go too tight or I'll risk fracturing the bead or covering it, which I don't really want to do. So now I've taken those pliers away, and I'm going to bring in some flush cutters into place, and I'm going to cut as close as I can to the wrap around the base of the loop. There we go, with the flush cutters. I'm using make sure you got that flat end close to the wrap, where the cut end you want to be placed, and then you need to take the tips of your chain nose pliers and just gently smooth the wire around in the direction of that it was travelling, so that there's no sharp ends. And there's your wrap loop ready to pop onto your earrings or necklace design. Right, so I'm talking through bracelet assembly in this section here, and you can see I've already joined this bracelet together, so I'll just talk you through the whole section. So I've got clasp at one end, and you can vary the number of jump rings in this section here to make the bracelet longer or shorter. This makes a 7.5, I think, oh sorry, actually it might make an 8-inch bracelet. So to make a 7.5, you just take the numbers of jump rings down, or even make the jump rings smaller, or even you can remove a set of components, but the best thing to do is just vary this number of jump rings and you can make the bracelet a bit smaller. So I've taken some 5mm, 7mm and 5mm and another 7mm jump rings down from the clasp, and these are all paired to add strength. And then I've looped, or sort of connected, this larger jump ring, the 7mm, to the end loops, or sort of side loops, I suppose, because you turn this component on the side now, because we attach through different loops for the necklace. And we're attaching on these top loops here, I suppose, which would have been the top necklace top loops. To one side, I suppose, of the Celtic knot shape. And you see then I've attached 8 jump rings through the end loops of the little bracelet connector that we made, and that attaches through the same points, I suppose, in mirror image to the next Celtic knot component. So those are flipped to mirror image. You can see that there, like so, with almost like a circle effect. You can see a circle effect of this main dominance of wireframe enclosing either side of the little loop component. And then the next, we've got another pair the same, but I've connected those with 2 sets of jump rings the other side, and then I've repeated that set of components again 1, 2, 3, 4 times along the necklace. 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of these components. You need 8 Celtic knot components, 4 bracelet links, 2 clasps, and loads of 5mm jump rings and a few 7mm jump rings. At the other end of the bracelet, you can see the simpler attachment, the shorter attachment that you can use, and that's the one you want to make up a 7.5-inch or bracelet or shorter. You can just use this arrangement here. So 5mm jump rings to these end loops, linked to 7mm pair and a 5mm pair up to the clasp, and this fits on the wrist in a really fluid. I'm going to come out in a really fluid way. This actually fits on your wrist in a really fluid way, and then all you need to do is attach this when you do up the clasp. This is where I'm going to look really clumsy. If you want to add a lobster claw instead of this S-shaped clasp, you can, but I do honestly find it easier to do up. I'll just make a hash of it here. You can see how fluid the bracelet is, and you can do the bracelet up. There you go. If I don't think about it, it happens. So all you need to do is just pinch that a little bit, and this will stay on really nice and securely in place. And it's a lovely bracelet to wear, really fluid design, and you can really see the pattern as you wear it against your skin. So there we go. That's the bracelet assembly. Here are the components you need to make up the floral earrings. Here's one made up already. You need a floral component that we made in the necklace. You need the wrap loop component that we've just made. Shepherd hood earring finding, 3 7mm external diameter jump rings and 2 5mm external diameter jump rings. So we'll start to assemble this piece. So the most fiddly bit actually is putting these jump rings into the petals here. So I'll show you that first because it's fiddly, and get that bit over and done with. So I'm going to bring in the 5mm, one of the 5mm jump rings, and I'm just going to pop it through front to back through the back of the earring. Oh, sorry, you see where I've just placed it on the inside edge of this covering component and in between the petal component, and I'm just going to place, oh sorry, the central petal component. I'm going to place this dangle into place. I just want the cut edge to be at the back. Let me have a think. So that's got to face upwards. I'm going to make sure that cut edge faces upwards. I think, let me just think, no, because if that flips down, I actually want that. So I've got to think about this because we want to make things as finished as possible. So if that sits like that, I actually want that to be like that. So I want the cut edge to sit at the back, just so it looks a bit nicer. So I've threaded that on, and I'm working at the back of the earring now, and I've got a pair of chain nose pliers. So I've got the other chain nose pliers in place. I'm just going to close that jump ring. Okay, just so it closes really nicely. So I've got one side done. So I'm going to bring in the other 5mm jump ring. And again, I've threaded it through into this little space here between where the petals sit over each other here. So I'm threading it through at the front, so it projects at the back again. Turn the piece over. This is, as I say, this is the fiddly bit. And I'm just going to grip that with, and if you want to work flat on a mat, that's absolutely fine. Grip the jump ring and then just thread that little loop of the wrap loop in. This is, again, I'm going to put it down. It might lose focus, so forgive me. And then I'm just going to grip that end of the jump ring and close that so that we get that into place nicely. And it's going to sit at the back of the flower, you see. Oh, no, come on. We can do it. There we are. Here we go. And then it's closed. Then it's closed. There we go. So that's now sitting at the back nicely, locked between these petals. So it can't move out of place because you've got this overlying petal in place. So that's really good. So that's going to sit at the back. So we've got that bit done. Now we're just going to start to assemble the top part. So I'm going to put 7mm jump rings, slightly larger ones, in through these top loops. So I'm going to put one in there through the top loop of this floral component, through all the loops, and then another through this side, and just make sure you close the jump ring. Make sure you hear that little lovely little click if you can. And then the third 7mm jump ring, I've got this quite large, so it gives us space for everything to fit together. Thread it through one and then the other, so it pulls them upwards. Can you see? Pulls them upwards. And then before I close the jump ring, I'm just going to pop in a shepherd's hook, and I just got to make sure the shepherd hook sits with the tail to the back of the earring. So I'm going to pop that on there through the shepherd's hook loop, and then close that jump ring up, and there we have a finished earring to match the other one that we've made. There we go. You can shorten these shepherd hooks if you like. Just make sure you round the end a little bit with a little file or like an emery board or whatever, so it fits nicely to the ear. Sometimes you can make a little bend to these earrings so they look like that as well. So depending on the earring finding you've got, just work with that. Just make sure that's at the same level. Just looks a bit more professional. There we go. So 2 floral earrings ready and assembled. We're just going to go on to the moth earring assembly as well now. Here are the moth and triquetra earrings ready for assembly. You can see one made up already. It's got 5mm jump rings linking the triquetra to the little moth, and 3 more 5mm ED jump rings attaching up to a shepherd's hook. So we're going to just do that little assembly so you can see what to do. So I've opened up these jump rings ready to assemble the piece. So bringing a 5mm jump ring, I'm putting one through the top loop of the moth, and you need a pair of chain nose pliers to do this. So holding the piece like that, just going to bring in this tricetta and close that jump ring. And this is fiddly, so just take your time. There's no rush. Close that jump ring with a little movement of the pliers. That's in the right place. I'm going to get another jump ring, do the same on the other side. You can put it through the loop, through the tricetta, as long as you've got the jump ring opened enough. If it's not too wide, if it's not wide enough, it won't fit through the whole thing and it'd be really awkward. So you can see that is assembled. I'm going to put a jump ring through the top loop on either side. I'm going to work quite quickly now. Just close them. It says I'm working quickly and I'm not. Another 5mm jump ring up through this loop. There we go. There we are. And the final one, picking it up through these top 2 jump rings, making again sure, oh, there it is. I knew I'd lost it. I cut another one. Oh well, I'm just going to cut that off. I'd lost it and I thought, well, where have I put it? And I'd actually attached it already. Get rid of that one. So I've got another 5mm jump ring. I'm going to attach it through both these top loops, because we've got to get everything ready for filming, you see, and you just literally, that was the prep. So another 5mm jump ring through this top set of loops, through a shepherd's hook, up we go, close it, and it's all done. So 2 lovely earrings ready to wear. They're quite long sort of statement ones, and I love the whole point about this. I love the line of all the gemstones feeding up the piece and the triangular shape of the tricetta and the moth leading out from each other. So those are ready to wear. Here I've got the whole necklace laid out, so you can work out where to assemble. So I'm going to talk through it all, because it's all assembled already. We can just talk through it all, but you have to do it in stages. So the first thing I did was that obviously you need to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of these Celtic knot components. And what I did was link them all to the clasp with 5mm external diameter jump rings in pairs in these top loops here, and the curve of the component is actually facing sort of downwards, if you see what I mean, whereas in the bracelet they're facing either side of these little loop components. You can see, so you can have them attached this way, or you can have them attached sideways. You can have them attached the other way up if you like too. You see, these are very, very versatile components. But in this case, I've got the curled loops attached with 5mm jump rings all the way around the necklace. So do that first of all, back up to the clasp. And that means then you can vary the length of the necklace according to your preference. So you can either take out components and add pair jump rings up to the length you want. This makes an 18-inch sort of standard size necklace. So the next thing you need to do is add in the next row of components. So I added in the gemstone flower to the first, I've got my hand over here so it's less confusing, to the base points of this Celtic knot with 5mm jump rings. So I did that next. Then I added the large flowers to just one loop through this point of the next Celtic knot, but I didn't attach this loop to this point yet, so I just left that one free. So working on a piece of a flat sheet of paper is better, or a flat bead mat in fact, is better. Work on a flat, don't work on a bus because things flop around all over the place. So work flat. So the next thing I did, and you do that both sides. The next thing I did then was add the larger fuchsia component. Okay, and I attached it to the end point of this second, so there's the middle one, there's the next one, so this next one from the middle, this next Celtic knot component from the middle, I attached a 7mm external diameter, not a 5mm, to this loop here, and a 7mm to the side loop of the next one along. 1, 2, 3 from the middle, there's the middle, 1, middle is number 1, 2, 3. So number 3, the nearest component to the middle, I attached this floral component to the second and the third components in between them. And so then I did that on both sides, and then I could attach this larger floral component to this to the larger fuchsia with a 5mm jump ring through the side loops here. You can see where I've just caught it below this top curl here and into this side curl here. So it just attaches it slightly at an angle and it actually makes it fit into the space better. And this smaller fuchsia attaches to the end point of this Celtic component and a central sort of looping point of this component. It doesn't quite stretch across to there, okay, and that means this fits closely to that one and fits into place nicely. So you can see there's some quite specific points. I might zoom in on that now just so you can see it. Let's zoom in so you can see that a bit more. So you've got the central floral component here attached to the bottom base points of the middle Celtic knot. Another large flower component is attached to the second Celtic knot out, the base point, and attached, not yet, but to the side lobe of this large flower component. The large flower component is attached to this point here, this side, the furthest away side point of the second Celtic knot out, and to the nearest to the midline side point of the third Celtic knot out. And then the smaller floral component goes into the same point, the same area as this larger component, all working on the second one out, and then a 5mm jump ring in through this sort of middle base loop here, this sort of central point here, not quite out to that side loop. You need to remember 5mm jump rings here, 7mm jump rings for this larger fuchsia, and then 5mm jump rings for all the other attachments, and do this on both sides as well. So moving on, we're now going to attach the moths to the base. So we've got that gemstone component here, and we're going to attach the moths on either side, and also attach, remember, a little dangle to that base point of this flower. So you can do that as well with the 5mm external jump ring. And just as you could put the wrap loop straight through the base of the flower, but it doesn't have as much flexibility of movement. This has a much more flexibility of movement if you add it with a jump ring. So these two moths will now attach to the floral components, the larger floral components. You can see I've attached them to the little antennae with, and I've used 7mm jump rings to the side petals on both sides. They're not quite the outer ones, there's central side petals on either side. Can you see where I've attached them? Okay, so that's where they attach. So zooming out again, you can see the whole necklace assembled. You've got the These will hang much better, obviously, once they're down on your neckline. That'll hang really nicely. So you've got your 13 Celtic knots attached around the clasp with 5mm external jump rings. You've attached these floral components of varying sizes with specific jump rings at specific points. So really to pay attention to that. Then you attach the lower layer of the moth components in the dangle. So there's 1, 2, 3 layers of assembly there. All right, well, I hope you enjoy wearing this and making this necklace. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm here to help if you need it on Rachel Norris Jewellery Designer on Facebook. So please find me and message me if you get stuck. I'm here to help, and I hope you've enjoyed making these designs.